Abandoned by family, poor girl saves a man. Little does she know he's a CEO who cherishes her deeply. Hi, my very beautiful and loving family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. With arms wide open and a heart full of boundless love, I welcome each and every one of you back to our special corner of warmth and joy. My dearest family, seeing you all return fills my heart with indescribable happiness. Like gentle rays of morning sunlight spreading their golden embrace across the earth, let our love for each other illuminate this precious moment we share. Your presence here is the most beautiful gift, each of you bringing your own unique light that makes our family circle glow ever brighter. Before we embark on today's heartwarming journey together, let us join hands in spirit for a prayer of peace and love. Dearest Heavenly Father, like a gentle breeze that carries whispers of love, let your peace float into every heart here today. Wrap each precious soul in your tender embrace. Fill our homes with laughter that echoes like sweet music, and let love flow like honey between us. Watch over our beloved family as we share this blessed time together. Amen. My cherished family, if your hearts are dancing with joy and your souls are finding peace in our precious moments together, please share your love by commenting yes below. Each yes is like a warm embrace, telling me that our hearts beat as one in this beautiful journey we share. With hearts intertwined and souls connected by threads of pure love, shall we begin our story, my treasured family? Sparkles. The rain fell mercilessly on that cold October night, each drop like a tiny dagger against Leona Mercy's exposed skin. Her thin jacket, once a vibrant red but now faded to a dull burgundy, provided little protection against nature's fury. The bus stop's metal roof had long since rusted through in places, creating a symphony of irregular drips that matched the erratic beating of her heart. Just 3 hours ago, she had stood in the doorway of her stepmother's house, clutching a small suitcase containing everything she owned in this world. Vivienne's cold eyes had shown no remorse as she'd uttered the words that shattered what little security Leona had managed to build. "Your father's been dead 2 years. I've paid my dues keeping you around. The house is being sold next week, and the new owners don't want any complications, as if Leona were nothing more than a stain on expensive furniture. At 26, she had spent years caring for her father through his illness, putting her dreams of art school on hold, only to be discarded like yesterday's trash by the woman who had sworn to love him forever. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the empty street before her. No buses would come at this hour, especially not in this forgotten corner of the city. Leona wiped away tears that mingled freely with raindrops on her cheeks. Her dark skin glistened in the faint glow of the single street lamp, its light flickering as if it too might give up at any moment. The sound came without warning, the high-pitched squeal of tires against wet asphalt, followed by the sickening crunch of metal. Leona's head whipped toward the noise just in time to see a sleek black car careen off the road and slam into a telephone pole less than 50 yards away. For a moment she didn't move, shock freezing her in place. Then something primal and instinctive took over. Abandoning her suitcase under the meager shelter of the bus stop, Leona ran toward the wreckage, her heart pounding in her throat. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood of what had once been an expensive luxury car. The front end was compressed like an accordion, the windshield a spider's web of cracks. Through them, Leona could make out a still figure slumped over the steering wheel. "Hello? Can you hear me?" she called, trying the passenger door. It was locked. Rain plastered her curls to her head as she moved to the driver's side, finding it partially ajar from the impact. The interior light revealed a man in his early 30s, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. His suit probably cost more than everything Leona had ever owned, but in this moment he was just a human being in desperate need. "Sir, please, wake up." Her voice shook as she reached in, pressing trembling fingers against his neck. The pulse was there, irregular, but present. With careful movements, she supported his head and shoulders, noticing the smell of expensive cologne mixed with the sharper tang of whiskey. He'd been drinking. The realization didn't stop her efforts as she gently eased him back against the seat, away from the deployed airbag. His eyelids fluttered briefly, revealing a sliver of startling blue eyes before closing again. A groan escaped. His lips, a good sign, digging her cell phone from her pocket, an old model with a cracked screen, but mercifully still functional. Leona dialed emergency services. Her voice steadied as she gave their location, answering questions about his condition with as much precision as she could muster. "Stay with me," she murmured, using her free hand to press her scarf against his bleeding temple. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." Rain continued to pour, soaking them both. The man's breathing seemed labored, each inhale a struggle. Leona kept talking, not sure if he could hear her, but needing to fill the terrible silence. "My name is Leona. I don't know yours yet, but I'm not leaving you. You're going to be okay. The ambulance is coming." Her words became a litany, a prayer, of sorts. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes before the wail of sirens split the night. Red and blue lights painted the rain-slicked street as paramedics rushed toward them. They worked with practiced efficiency, asking Leona questions she couldn't answer as they stabilized the man's neck and carefully extracted him from the wreckage. "Are you related?" one asked, eyeing her drenched appearance with barely concealed suspicion. "No, I just witnessed the accident," she replied, suddenly aware of how she must look, soaking wet, makeup streaked down her face, clothes that had seen better days. Nothing like someone who would know a man who drove a car like that. We're taking him to Mercy General," the paramedic said, already turning away. "You should probably go home and get dry." Home. The word was a knife twist. Leona watched as they loaded the unconscious man into the ambulance, the doors closing with a decisive thud. In that moment, something incomprehensible possessed her. She couldn't explain it then, or perhaps ever, but she couldn't bear the thought of him waking alone in a sterile hospital room, confused and in pain. Retrieving her suitcase from the bus stop, Leona hailed a passing taxi, spending money she couldn't afford to follow the ambulance to Mercy General. By the time she arrived, they had already taken him inside. With resolute steps, she approached the reception desk. "I'm here for the car accident victim they just brought in," she said, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. The receptionist barely looked up. "Are you family?" Leona hesitated only a fraction of a second. "I'm his wife." The lie fell from her lips with surprising ease. The receptionist's eyes flicked to Leona's bare left hand. Noticing, Leona quickly tucked it into her pocket. "We've been having the rings resized," she improvised. "Please, I need to see him." Perhaps it was the genuine concern in her voice, or perhaps the receptionist was simply too busy to care. But Leona soon found herself directed to the emergency department, where doctors were already working on the mysterious man. A nurse approached her with a clipboard. "Mrs. Cade," Leona said, catching sight of the name on a partially visible wallet that had been removed from the man's jacket. "Leona Cade. Mrs. Cade, your husband has sustained a serious concussion and possible internal injuries. We're taking him for scans now. Has he had any previous medical conditions we should know about?" Leona swallowed hard. "Not that I'm aware of. We haven't been married long." The nurse nodded, making notes. "We'll need insurance information when you have a moment." As the nurse walked away, Leona sank into a waiting room chair, the full weight of her impulsive decision crashing down on her. What was she doing? This was madness. She was homeless, jobless, and now pretending to be the wife of a complete stranger. Just because... Because what? because she couldn't bear to leave him alone, because for once in her life she wanted to be the one who stayed instead of the one who was left behind. Outside the window, lightning illuminated the parking lot. The storm showed no signs of abating, much like the tumult in Leona's heart. She closed her eyes, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Whatever came next, there would be consequences for this night's decisions. But as she drifted into an uneasy sleep in the uncomfortable hospital chair, one thought remained. At least neither of them was alone in the storm anymore. Chapter 2. Guardian Angel 7 Days. 168 hours of fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, and the steady beep of monitors that had become as familiar to Leona as her own heartbeat. She had barely left Alan and Cade's side, sleeping upright in the stiff visitor's chair, washing in the small bathroom sink, and subsisting on vending machine snacks and hospital cafeteria coffee. The nurses had grown accustomed to her presence, some offering sympathetic smiles or an extra pillow, others eyeing her with thinly veiled suspicion. Leona couldn't blame them. Her story had more holes than the worn sweater she'd been wearing for days, but she persisted in her vigil, driven by a compulsion she couldn't fully explain even to herself. On the third day, when the doctor mentioned specialized medication that might help reduce the swelling in Alan's brain, medication not covered by insurance, Leona had made her decision without hesitation. The gold chain with its small heart-shaped locket had been her mother's final gift before cancer took her 15 years ago. Inside was a tiny photo of them together, Leona's gap-toothed 8-year-old smile beaming alongside her mother's radiant face. It was her talisman, her comfort, her most precious possession. The pawnshop owner had barely glanced at the sentimental value, but the gold was real. $700. Enough for the medication and a few days' worth of food. Leona had walked out of the shop, feeling physically lighter around her neck. The phantom weight of the chain, a hollow reminder of what she'd sacrificed. It was worth it, she whispered to the unconscious man on the afternoon of the 6th day. The doctor had said the swelling was finally subsiding. Alanon would likely wake soon. She'd taken to talking to him, filling the silence with stories from her life or reading aloud from discarded magazines in the waiting room. Sometimes she simply described the weather outside the window he couldn't see. It's sunny today, not a cloud in the sky, which feels like false advertising for how cold it actually is. Leona adjusted the thin hospital blanket over his still form. October's always like that, though, isn't it? All golden promise on the surface, but with winter's bite just underneath. His hand lay palm up on the blanket, an IV taped to the back of it. Without thinking, Leona gently traced the lines crossing his palm with her fingertip. His hands were strong but uncalloused, hands that had never known hard labor, a stark contrast to her own, worn from years of practical work. "I don't know why. I'm still here," she confessed softly. "I should have walked away after they brought you in, should have told the truth. I'm not your wife. I don't even know you." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "But I couldn't bear the thought of you waking up alone. Nobody should wake up alone in a hospital." The memory of her father's final days surfaced, how he'd gripped her hand with surprising strength and made her promise never to waste her life waiting for love that wasn't freely given. She'd thought he was talking about her art, about the scholarship she'd turned down to care for him. Now, she wondered if he'd somehow foreseen her future with Vivienne. "My father would think I've lost my mind," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Spending a week with a stranger, selling my mother's necklace for his medicine." She sighed deeply. "Maybe I have lost it, but somehow this feels right, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Isn't that strange?" She studied his face, peaceful in unconsciousness. The gash on his temple had been stitched neatly, already beginning to heal. He was undeniably handsome. Strong jawline, straight nose, thick dark hair now tousled against the white pillowcase. But it wasn't his looks that had compelled her to stay. It was something else, something she couldn't articulate. "I've been thinking about what happens when you wake up," she said, withdrawing her hand from his. "I'll tell you the truth, of course. Apologize for the deception. Then I'll slip away and you can go back to your real life, whatever that is." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "And I'll figure out mine." A soft knock interrupted her monologue. Dr. Patel entered with a clipboard, her expression cautiously optimistic. "Mrs. Cade, your husband's latest scans look promising. The medication has been effective. The swelling has reduced significantly. I expect he'll regain consciousness within the next 24 hours. Leona nodded, guilt twisting in her stomach at the continued use of the false name. "That's wonderful news. Thank you, Doctor. When he wakes, he may be disoriented, possibly agitated. It's important to remain calm and reassuring. Familiar faces and voices help anchor patients after traumatic brain injuries." "I understand." After the doctor left, Leona rested her forehead against her clasped hands. Tomorrow, this strange interlude would end. She would confess and disappear, leaving Alan Cade to whatever life awaited him beyond these sterile walls. The thought brought an unexpected ache. "Wherever you go tomorrow," she whispered, "I hope you find happiness, Alan Cade. I hope someone loves you enough to stay, even when it's hard." That night, Leona dreamed of her mother. They sat together on a sunlit porch, stringing beads, for necklaces as they had when Leona was small. "You always had a generous heart," her mother said, her fingers deftly threading colorful glass beads onto a string. "Too generous sometimes." "Is that wrong?" Leona asked, struggling with a knot. Her mother smiled enigmatically. "Wrong? No, but costly." The dream dissolved as Leona felt something brush against her cheek. Startled awake, she found herself still, in the hospital chair, dawn's first light filtering through the blinds. For a moment, she thought she'd imagined the touch, until she realized Alan's eyes were open, his gaze fixed on her face. "You're real," he whispered, his voice hoarse. From disuse, Leona froze, heart hammering against her ribs. "Yes," she managed. "I'm real." His brow furrowed slightly, confusion evident. "You were talking to me. You heard me?" The possibility that he'd been aware of her one-sided conversation sent heat rushing to her cheeks. "Your voice. It was like a light in the darkness." His words were slow, deliberate, as if each required enormous effort. I tried to follow it back. Tears pricked at Leona's eyes. "I'm glad it helped." A faint smile touched his lips. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know, but your eyes." He blinked slowly, as if trying to clear his vision. "They're kind. Sad, but kind." The moment was interrupted by a nurse entering to check vital signs. Within minutes, the room was a flurry of activity. Doctors examining Alan, asking him questions to assess his cognitive function, explaining what had happened. Leona retreated to the corner, suddenly feeling like an intruder. When the medical staff finally filtered out, promising to return soon for more tests, silence fell between them. Alan looked at her with new awareness, his blue eyes sharp despite his weakened state. "They tell me you're my wife," he said quietly. The moment of truth. Leona took a deep breath, steeling herself. "About that, they also tell me you haven't left my side for 7 days. That you sold a necklace to pay for medication insurance wouldn't cover." Leona swallowed hard. "I need to explain." "No." But the firmness in his voice surprised her. "Not yet. First, I need to say thank you. You don't owe me any thanks. I lied to them. To you. You saved my life." His gaze was unwavering. "The doctor said if I'd been found even 10 minutes later, or if that medication hadn't been administered when it was, He let the implication hang in the air. Leona looked down at her hands, unable to meet his eyes. Anyone would have called an ambulance, but not anyone would have stayed. He reached out, his movement still unsteady, and caught her wrist. His touch was gentle but insistent. "Look at me, please." Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. "What's your name?" "Your real name?" "Leona. Leona Mercy." He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "Leona Mercy, my guardian angel." The way he said her name, like it was something precious, something to be savored, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I'm not an angel," she protested softly. "Just someone who happened to be there." "Then I'm grateful for coincidence." His thumb brushed lightly over her pulse point. "Now, tell me your story, Leona Mercy, the true one, and then perhaps we can decide together what happens next." As sunlight strengthened outside the window, Leona took a deep breath and began to speak, unaware that this moment, this confession, would alter the course of both their lives irrevocably. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again, and some chains, once broken, forge themselves into something stronger, something unbreakable. Chapter 3. The Invitation. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the hospital room as Leona finished her story. She had told him everything about her father's death, her stepmother's coldness, being thrown out that rainy night, and the impulsive lie that had allowed her to stay by his side. Throughout her halting confession, Al-Anon had remained silent, his expression unreadable, save for occasional flickers of emotion in those penetrating blue eyes. "So now you know," she concluded, her voice barely audible. "I'm not your wife. I'm nobody. Just a homeless woman who made a reckless decision." She stood, gathering her worn jacket. "I should go before the hospital staff realizes—" "Where?" Al-Anon's question stopped her mid-movement. Leona blinked, confused. "What? Where will you go?" His tone was gentle but insistent. The question hung in the air between them, exposing the raw truth Leona had been avoiding. She had nowhere. No home, no job, no family. Just a small suitcase of belongings and less than $100 to her name. "I'll figure something out," she said with forced brightness. "I always do." Al-Anon shifted in his bed, wincing slightly at the movement. "You sold your mother's necklace for me, a stranger." Leona looked away, uncomfortable with his focus on that particular detail. It was just a thing. It wasn't just a thing. There was a certainty in his voice that made her look back at him. "Nothing that precious is ever just a thing." A lump formed in her throat. He understood. Somehow this man she'd known for less than a day conscious understood what that sacrifice had meant. "I'd like to help you, Leona." She stiffened. "I don't need charity." A small smile touched his lips. "No, I don't imagine you do. But I owe you a debt that can't be repaid with money alone." "You don't owe me anything. We'll have to disagree on that point." He held her gaze steadily. "I have a proposal, not charity, an exchange." Despite herself, curiosity flickered within her. "What kind of exchange?" "I'll be discharged tomorrow, but the doctor says I shouldn't be alone for at least 2 weeks. Concussion protocol." His fingers absently traced the stitches at his temple. "I need someone I can trust to help me during recovery. Someone who's already proven they care about my well-being more than what they can get from me." Leona frowned. "Surely you have family, friends." Something dark flashed across his features. "I have plenty of people who want things from Al-Anon Cade, CEO of Cade Industries. People who'd be delighted to have me at a disadvantage." He paused. "But I find myself short on people who care about me as a person." The sadness underlying his words resonated with Leona in ways she hadn't expected. Loneliness, recognized loneliness. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked carefully. "Come stay at my estate during my recovery. Help me follow doctor's orders," which I'm notoriously bad at doing. In exchange, I'll provide you with room, board, and a generous stipend. Once I'm fully recovered, you'll have enough saved to start fresh. Apartment, job, whatever you need. He watched her face closely. 2 weeks, then you're free to go with no obligations. Leona's mind raced. The offer was logical, practical, a simple exchange of services, yet something about it made her pulse quicken. 2 weeks in close proximity to this man who already affected her in ways she couldn't quite define. Your family won't mind a stranger. Suddenly appearing, another shadow crossed his face. My household staff are discreet and well paid to be so. As for family, they'll adapt. They always do when it suits them. The bitterness in his tone told Leona there were depths to Alan and Cade she hadn't yet glimpsed. Pain carefully concealed beneath his composed exterior. I'm not a nurse, she said, offering one last token resistance. I don't need a nurse. I need someone honest. He extended his hand to her. Do we have an agreement, Leona Mercy? Looking at his outstretched hand, Leona felt as though she stood at a crossroads. The sensible path would be to decline, to walk away now before she became further entangled in this man's complicated life. But sense had never been her heart's primary compass. She placed her hand in his. 2 weeks. His fingers closed around hers, warm and secure. 2 weeks, he echoed, satisfaction evident in his voice. The following afternoon, Leona found herself in the passenger seat of a sleek black car, not the one from the accident but an identical replacement, with Alan beside her, insisting on driving despite her protests. The doctor said no driving for at least a week, she reminded him, as he adjusted the mirrors. Doctors always overestimate recovery time, he replied, though he winced slightly as he turned his head. Besides, I've been driven by others my entire life. Sometimes a man needs to take the wheel. There was something in the way he said it, a weighted meaning beyond the literal, that made Leona study his profile more closely. Though still pale from his hospital stay, Alan exuded a natural authority, his movements precise and deliberate. But there was tension there too, a tightly coiled energy that suggested he rarely relaxed his guard. As they pulled away from the hospital, Leona's stomach knotted with anxiety. What had she gotten herself into? The clothes she wore, a simple blue dress and cardigan, had been delivered that morning by Alan's assistant, along with toiletries and other necessities. The thoughtfulness of the gesture had touched her, even as it underscored the vast difference in their circumstances. They drove in silence for several minutes, leaving the city behind for winding roads that climbed into the hills overlooking the valley. Exclusive neighborhoods gave way to even more exclusive estates, hidden behind high walls and elaborate gates. You're quiet, Alan observed, his eyes on the road, just taking it all in. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. It's a lot, isn't it, all this? He gestured vaguely at the passing mansions. It's different from what I'm used to, she admitted. Tell me about what you're used to. Where did you grow up? The question was casual, but Leona sensed genuine interest behind it. Small town in Georgia. My father was a high school music teacher. Mom worked at the local library. Nothing fancy, but we were happy. Music teacher? Do you play? Piano. A little. I'm rusty now. After Mom died, there wasn't much music in our house for a while. Alan nodded, understanding in his silence. After a moment, he reached for the car's audio system. Soft jazz filled the space between them, a melancholy saxophone that perfectly captured the bittersweet mood. Coltrane, Leona murmured, surprised. Alan's eyebrows rose. You know jazz? Dad was obsessed. Said it was America's only true art form. Smart man. He adjusted the volume slightly. What was his favorite? Miles Davis' Kind of Blue was practically our family soundtrack. A genuine smile spread across Alan's face, transforming his features. Mine too. My mother hated it, said it was derivative and depressing, which only made me play it louder, of course. The image of a rebellious young Allanan made Leona smile in return. Teenage rebellion via jazz, very sophisticated. I was an insufferable snob even then, he admitted, with a self-deprecating laugh. The tension in the car eased as they discovered this unexpected common ground. For the next several miles, they traded favorite albums and artists, their conversation flowing with surprising ease. Leona found herself laughing at Allanan's story of sneaking into a jazz club at 16 using a laughably fake ID, only to be caught when the owner turned out to be his father's college roommate. I thought my life was over, he recalled. Instead, the man sat me down at his private table and gave me a 2-hour lecture on the difference between West Coast and East Coast jazz styles. Best punishment ever, Leona commented. Changed my life. I started collecting vinyl the next day. They were so engrossed in conversation that Leona almost missed their arrival at a massive wrought-iron gate. Allanan pressed a button, and the gate swung open silently, revealing a tree-lined driveway that curved out of sight. Reality crashed back as Leona took in the sheer scale of the property. Manicured gardens stretched in every direction, with glimpses of what appeared to be a lake in the distance. As they rounded the final curve, the house itself came into view, a sprawling modern mansion of glass and stone that seemed to rise organically from the landscape. "Home sweet home," Allanan said, his voice taking on a different quality, cooler, more reserved. Leona's mouth went dry. "It's impressive. It's excessive," he corrected, surprising her. 12,000 square feet for one person is the definition of excess, but it serves its purpose, which is reminding everyone that Allanan Cade belongs at the top. There was no pride in his statement, only a matter-of-fact acknowledgement that struck Leona as profoundly sad. They pulled up to the front entrance, where an elderly man in a simple suit waited. As they stepped from the car, he approached with measured steps. "Welcome home, Mr. Cade. We're relieved to see you recovered." "Thank you, Harrison. This is Miss Mercy. She'll be staying with us during my convalescence." If Harrison found anything unusual about this arrangement, his impassive expression revealed nothing. "Very good, sir. I've prepared the blue suite as requested. Miss Mercy's belongings have been placed there." Leona almost laughed at the thought of her single, shabby suitcase being referred to as belongings, but she managed a polite smile instead. "Thank you." As they entered the vast foyer, all soaring ceilings and dramatic lighting, Leona felt increasingly out of place. The interior was meticulously designed in shades of grey, white and black, with occasional bold splashes of red in the artwork. Beautiful but cold, like a museum rather than a home. "Harrison will show you to your suite," Allanan said. "Dinner is at 7, but feel free to rest until then. You must be exhausted." The formal tone he'd adopted since their arrival created an invisible barrier between them, erasing the easy rapport they'd established during the drive. Leona felt a pang of disappointment, but nodded her understanding. "Thank you. I think I will rest a bit." She followed Harrison up a sweeping staircase, feeling Allanan's eyes on her back. At the top, she couldn't resist glancing back. He stood, exactly where she'd left him, his expression thoughtful as he watched her ascend to the upper floor of his domain. Their eyes met briefly before he turned away, reaching for his phone as it chimed with a message. The spell of their shared car ride had broken. Reality had reasserted itself, reminding Leona of the fundamental truth. She was here as an employee, not a friend. Certainly not anything more. For 2 weeks, she would live in this beautiful, soulless mansion, helping its equally beautiful, equally guarded owner recover. Then she would leave, taking nothing but memories and the promised stipend. That was the agreement. Clean, simple, temporary. So why did temporary already feel like not enough time? Chapter 4. Cold Welcome. The blue suite was larger than any apartment Leona had ever lived in. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed breathtaking views of manicured gardens and distant mountains. After a long shower, a luxury after a week in the hospital, she examined her reflection. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she'd lost weight she couldn't afford. The closet was already stocked with clothing in her size, elegant pieces in blues, greens, and neutrals that complemented her complexion. The thoughtfulness both touched and unsettled her. At 7, Harrison escorted her through the mansion's corridors. "Mr. Cade designed this home himself," he offered. "He has quite the eye for architectural detail." "It's beautiful," Leona acknowledged, "but it feels impersonal," Harrison supplied. "I was going to say carefully curated." An apt description. Mr. Cade approaches his living space, as he does most things, with precision and discipline, Harrison replied, a note of fondness softening his tone. Though the master suite contains rather more personality. As they approached the dining room, Harrison slowed. "I should warn you, Mr. Cade has unexpected company this evening." The dining room doors swung open, revealing a scene that made her stomach clench. Allanan sat at the head of a massive table, his expression rigid as a silver-haired woman spoke animatedly. Two others, a man about Allanan's age and a younger woman, flanked the table. Harrison announced their arrival, and all eyes turned toward Leona. Allanan's face immediately softened as he rose. "Leona, perfect timing." He crossed to her, taking her hand in a gesture that seemed both protective and possessive. "I apologize for the surprise. My family decided to welcome me home without notice." The silver-haired woman assessed Leona with surgical precision. "So this is your mysterious savior. Leona, this is my mother, Victoria Cade, my cousin Dominic Westfield, and his wife Eliza." Victoria extended a manicured hand. "Charmed, my dear. Alan has told us absolutely nothing about you, which only piqued our curiosity." The shortened name, Alan, seemed to irritate Allanan, though he masked it quickly. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Leona replied, noting the firmness of Victoria's grip. "I'm sorry if my presence is an intrusion." "Nonsense," Victoria replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Anyone who saved my son's life is welcome, though I'm surprised he didn't inform me about his accident until after his discharge." Allanan guided Leona to a chair at his right. "Mother, I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily, because knowing your only son nearly died is unnecessary worry." Victoria's laugh was brittle. Dominic raised his wine glass. "Well, I for one am glad you didn't croak, cuz the board meeting next week would have been a nightmare to reschedule." "Your concern touches me deeply," Allanan replied dryly. Eliza leaned toward Leona. "So, how exactly did you two meet?" Alan's been frustratingly vague. Before Leona could answer, servers appeared with the first course. These people, with their perfect clothes and razor-sharp smiles, were playing a game whose rules she didn't. "No, I witnessed Mr. Cade's accident," she finally said. "I called the ambulance and accompanied him to the hospital." "How fortunate you happened to be there," Victoria remarked. "And what do you do, Leona, when you're not rescuing handsome strangers?" Allanan intervened. "Leona is an artist, quite talented." Leona blinked in surprise. She hadn't mentioned her artistic aspirations, really. Eliza's interest seemed genuine. "What medium?" "Mixed media, primarily," Leona answered, "though I haven't had much time for it recently." Leona put her career on hold to care for her father during his illness, Allanan added, his hand briefly covering hers. Victoria's eyes narrowed at the gesture. "How admirable," the older woman murmured. "Family should always come first. Shouldn't it, Alan?" The tension between mother and son was palpable. Dominic broke it with a theatrical sigh. "God, not this. Again. Can we have one dinner without family psychodrama?" Conversation shifted to business matters. Victoria dominated the discussion, frequently questioning Allenon's decisions. When her criticism grew especially pointed, his hand found Leona's under the table, their fingers interlacing briefly. "Leona, dear," Victoria said suddenly, "you must tell us about your family. Where are you from originally?" "Georgia, a small town called Millbrook. My parents were both educators." "Were?" Victoria seized on the past tense. "Both deceased, then?" "Mother?" Allenon's voice held a warning. "Yes, they've both passed," Leona answered calmly. "My mother, when I was young, my father more recently." How terribly sad. Victoria's sympathy sounded rehearsed. "No siblings? No family at all?" Before Leona could respond, an elderly woman appeared in the doorway with the kitchen staff following. "Matilda," Allenon acknowledged her with genuine warmth. "Your Wellington was exceptional as always." Matilda's weathered face creased in a smile. "I've prepared your favorite chocolate souffle for dessert, special for your homecoming." She approached Leona, studying her openly. "So you're the young lady who saved our boy." "I just did what anyone would do," Leona replied. "Not anyone, child, not in this day and age." She patted Leona's shoulder with unexpected familiarity. "You eat up now. Too thin by half you are." The simple kindness, after hours of calculated politeness, nearly brought tears to Leona's eyes. As Matilda departed, Victoria's lips thinned in displeasure. "Really, Allen, the staff is becoming entirely too familiar." "They've earned their familiarity," Allenon replied evenly. Victoria watched Leona calculatingly. "I hope you'll be comfortable in the blue suite. It has such a lovely view. Though I'm surprised Allen didn't put you in the rose suite, adjacent to the master bedroom. It would be more convenient." The implication hung in the air. Allenon set down his fork with deliberate precision. "Leona is here as my guest and temporary health aid, Mother, not as my lover. Though even if she were, it would hardly be appropriate dinner conversation." Victoria's smile was razor-thin. "Always so proper in public, aren't you, dear? Your father was the same way." The mention of his father caused Allenon to go utterly still. After a moment, he pushed back his chair and stood. "It's been a long day, and I'm still recovering. If you'll excuse us, I think Leona and I will retire early." Without waiting for a response, he extended his hand to Leona. Once out of sight of the dining room, his shoulders sagged visibly. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "I had no idea. They would show up tonight." "It's all right," Leona assured him. "They're concerned about you." His laugh held no humor. "They're concerned about what my accident means for their financial security." "How are you holding up?" he asked, studying her face. "Mother can be intense." "I'm fine, though I am curious. About something. Only one thing. You're more restrained than I expected." Leona smiled despite herself. "How did you know I was an artist? I never mentioned it." Allenon looked slightly abashed. "I may have had my assistant do a basic background check. Nothing invasive," he added quickly. "Just enough to know you weren't an axe murderer hiding behind those kind eyes." "And what did this basic check reveal?" "Leona Mercy, 26. BFA in studio art from SCAD, partial scholarship. Withdrew during senior year following father's cancer diagnosis. No criminal record. Their loss was significant, I'd say. It was just a job." "That's not what I meant. Their loss, not seeing your potential, was significant." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Well, your background check missed a few things." "Like what?" "I make exceptional blueberry pancakes. I'm terrible at chess, and I have an irrational fear of geese." Allenon laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that transformed his face. "Geese? Really?" "They're aggressive and they have teeth on their tongues. It's completely rational, actually." When their laughter subsided, a comfortable silence fell between them. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" for making me laugh. It's been a while." He swayed slightly, reaching for the banister. Leona steadied him with a hand on his arm. "You've overdone it. Doctor's orders were rest, remember?" "Oh, fine," he protested, though he didn't pull away from her touch. "You're pale as a sheet, and you've been hiding a headache since before dinner." After a moment's hesitation, Al-Anon nodded, allowing Leona to support him as they climbed the remaining stairs. This close, she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle with notes of cedar. "Here we are," he said, hesitating at his door. "I can manage from here." "All right, but take these." She produced his painkillers. "Two now, 2 in the morning." "Yes, ma'am." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Good night, Leona." "Good night, Al-Anon." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Leona, I meant what I said at dinner. You're talented. Don't let my mother or anyone else make you doubt that." Before she could respond, he'd slipped into his room, the door closing softly behind him. Alone in the corridor, Leona released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. 1 day down, 13 to go. Already, the line between professional aid and something more complicated was blurring, and based on Victoria's assessment, the matriarch had recognized the danger instantly. As Leona made her way back to her suite, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd entered a battlefield with rules she didn't understand and stakes far higher than a 2-week stipend. Yet even knowing this, she wouldn't have turned back. Something about Al-Anon Cade called to her, some recognition of a kindred spirit beneath the wealth and walls he'd built. Chapter 5. Hidden torment. Leona awoke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was, the luxurious bed and elegant surroundings so foreign to her normal life. Then memory rushed in. The accident, the hospital, Al-Anon Cade. The clock showed just past 7. After years of early shifts, at the gallery her body refused to sleep in, even in surroundings this comfortable. Stretching, she rose and padded to the window, taking in the spectacular view of mist rising from the valley below. She showered quickly, choosing simple black leggings and an oversized blue sweater from the wardrobe. The quality of even these casual clothes was evident in how they felt against her skin. Following the scent of coffee, she found the kitchen, a vast, professional space with copper pots hanging from racks and a center island larger than her childhood bedroom. Matilda stood at a range, expertly flipping pancakes while keeping an eye on sizzling bacon. "Good morning," Leona ventured, suddenly unsure if she was allowed in this space. Matilda turned with a warm smile. "Ah, there you are, child. I was wondering when you'd find your way down." "Hungry?" "Starving, actually," Leona admitted. "Good. Sit yourself down there." Matilda nodded toward a cozy nook by a bay window. "You're too thin by half. We'll fix that while you're here." The motherly concern brought an unexpected lump to Leona's throat. "Thank you. But shouldn't I eat? In the dining room, or wait for Al-Anon?" Matilda's laugh was rich and warm. "Lord, no. That dining room is for show, not eating. Mr. Cade takes breakfast in his study or not at all, and the rest of them—" She made a dismissive gesture. "Let's just say I'm not wasting my good pancakes on people who only push food around their plates." A young woman in a simple uniform appeared with coffee and a basket of still warm pastries. "This is Elisa," Matilda introduced. "She helps me keep this place running when the vultures descend." "Matilda," Elisa admonished gently, though her eyes sparkled with suppressed laughter. "Pah! She's not a guest. She's the angel who saved our boy." Matilda set a plate piled high with pancakes and bacon before Leona. "Has Al-Anon had breakfast yet?" "That's half the reason I'm glad to see you," Matilda said, concern creasing her face. "He's locked himself in that study since before dawn. Won't answer when I knock, just says he's fine and not hungry. She sighed. He gets this way sometimes, like he's carrying the weight of the world. I'll bring him something after I eat, Leona offered. He needs to take his medication with food. Bless you. Matilda squeezed her shoulder. Maybe he'll listen to you. As Leona ate, Elisa and Matilda moved efficiently around the kitchen, their easy banter creating an atmosphere completely at odds with the cold formality of the rest of the mansion. How long have you worked for the Cades? Leona asked. 38 years, Matilda replied proudly. Started when little Alan was just a baby. His mother wanted a French chef, all fancy this and nouvelle that, but his father insisted on someone who could make proper comfort food. Her eyes grew distant. Mr. Jonathan understood what a home should be. She caught herself, shaking her head. Listen to me, gossiping like some old biddy. Actually, I'd love to hear more, Leona said sincerely. Alan doesn't talk much about his past. Matilda studied her with shrewd eyes. No, he wouldn't. That boy keeps everything locked up tight. Been that way since he was a teenager. Did something happen? Leona asked before she could stop herself. Matilda hesitated, seeming to weigh her words carefully. It's not my place to tell his stories, but I will say this. Wealth doesn't shield you from tragedy, child. Sometimes it just gives you more ways to hide from it. After breakfast, Leona took a tray Matilda had prepared to Alanon's study, coffee black with a touch of cinnamon, and bite-sized foods designed to be eaten one-handed without looking away from his work. The West Wing felt different from the rest of the house, warmer somehow, less aggressively minimalist. Family photos lined one wall, a younger Alanon in a rowing team, grinning in a Harvard sweatshirt, another of him standing beside an older man with the same intense blue eyes, his father, presumably. The study doors were impressive, mahogany with lion head handles. Leona balanced the tray and knocked firmly. I told you I'm not hungry, Matilda, came Alanon's muffled voice. It's Leona, and hunger isn't optional when you're on medication. A pause, then the sound of movement. The door opened to reveal Alanon, looking distinctly worse than the previous evening. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Despite this, he wore an impeccably tailored shirt and slacks. You look terrible, Leona said bluntly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Your bedside manner needs work. My honesty is part of my charm. She nudged past him into the study, setting the tray on a side table. Have you slept at all? Sleep is overrated. The study reflected more personality than the rest of the house. Bookshelves lined with well-worn volumes, a vintage record player in one corner with vinyl albums stacked nearby, and framed artwork that Leona recognized as original pieces from significant contemporary artists. Most striking was the massive desk dominating the center of the room. Multiple screens displayed graphs, spreadsheets, and news feeds, while scattered papers covered every other surface. An empty scotch glass sat beside a half-drunk bottle of water. Drinking with a concussion? Leona nodded toward the glass. Brilliant. It's yesterday's, he replied defensively. I'm not completely reckless, just mostly reckless. Sit down and eat something before you fall down. To her surprise, he complied, sinking into a leather armchair. Up close, the strain on his face was even more evident, lines of tension around his mouth, a slight tremor in his usually steady hands. I need to finish reviewing these quarterly reports, he said, though he accepted the coffee she handed him. They can wait. Your health can't. She placed a small egg cup in his hand. Eat. He complied again, his automatic obedience suggesting how truly exhausted he was. Did you sleep well? The blue suite can be drafty. I slept better than I have. In months. Stop changing the subject. She perched on the edge of his desk. What's going on, Alanon? This isn't just about work. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. Today is... "A difficult day for me," he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Anniversary?" Surprise flickered across his face. "How did you know?" "I recognize the signs. The isolation, the work distraction, the trying too hard normalcy." She kept her tone gentle. "Loss anniversaries are hard. Is that professional experience speaking?" "Personal." She met his gaze steadily. "My mother died on May 12th. Every year, I buy a cupcake with a candle, sing happy birthday because that's what she would have wanted, then cry myself to sleep. Grief doesn't follow a schedule." The raw honesty of her statement seemed to catch him off guard. He set down his coffee cup, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "My father died 14 years ago today," he said finally. Something in his voice suggested there was more to the story, but he didn't elaborate. "I'm sorry," Leona said simply. "Don't be. It was a long time ago," but the tightness around his eyes belied his dismissive words. "That doesn't make it easier. Some wounds don't heal just because time passes." He looked up at her, something vulnerable, flickering in his gaze. "No, they don't." The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged. Then Al-Anon's phone buzzed, shattering the connection. He glanced at the screen, his expression closing off. "I need to take this," he said, professional mask sliding back into place. "Financial markets are opening." "Of course." Leona stood, gathering her composure. "But please eat the rest of this and take your medication. Doctor's orders." He nodded distractedly, already reaching for the phone. Leona moved toward the door, understanding she'd been dismissed, but as she reached for the handle, his voice stopped her. "Leona?" She turned. "Yes? Thank you." The simple words carried weight beyond their syllables. For bringing breakfast? For not treating grief like a pathology, for understanding there are some days when functioning is the best I can manage. The unexpected honesty touched her deeply. "We all have those days, Al-Anon. Even billionaire CEOs." A shadow crossed his face, suggesting deeper pain than he was ready to share. "Some days are harder than others." Recognizing the walls going back up, Leona nodded and slipped from the study. The heavy door closed behind her with a decisive click, but not before she heard him answer the phone in a voice completely devoid of the vulnerability he'd shown moments before. "Cade here. Yes, I've seen the numbers." Back in the hallway, Leona leaned against the wall, processing their interaction. Whatever tragedy lurked in Al-Anon's past, it had shaped him profoundly. The contrast between the vulnerable man who'd just thanked her for understanding and the controlled CEO who spoke on the phone highlighted the divisions within him. As she walked back toward the kitchen, she found herself torn between professional distance and genuine concern. She'd signed on to help with his physical recovery, not to heal emotional wounds. Yet something about Al-Anon Cade called to her, not his wealth or power, but the glimpses of the wounded man beneath the formidable exterior. 2 weeks suddenly seemed both too short a time and dangerously long for a heart already inclined to care too much. Chapter 6. Blossoming Trust. The next 3 days established a rhythm between them. Each morning, Leona would bring breakfast to Al-Anon's study, ensuring he took his medication. She'd check his healing wound and remind him of the doctor's instructions: rest, limited screen time, no stressful decision-making, all of which he systematically ignored. Victoria and her entourage had departed the morning after their arrival, summoned by some social obligation in the city. Their absence lifted a palpable weight from the mansion. Al-Anon emerged from his study more frequently, and the staff moved, with noticeably lighter steps. On the 4th day, Leona decided enough was enough. She entered the study without knocking, strode directly to the windows, and threw open the heavy drapes. "We're going outside," she announced. Al-Anon looked up from his computer, squinting against the sudden flood of sunlight. "I'm in the middle of something. You've been in the middle of something for 4 days. Your recovery plan specifically mentions daily outdoor activity. I went to the terrace yesterday. Stepping outside for a 3-minute phone call doesn't count. Leona crossed her arms. The doctor said moderate exercise would help your recovery. Your headaches are getting worse because you're glued to these screens. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. How did you know about the headaches? You've been taking double doses of painkillers. I count them, she replied calmly. And you squint when the light hits your eyes directly. For a moment she thought he would refuse. Then with a sigh that conveyed both exasperation and surrender, he closed his laptop. 30 minutes, he conceded. 90 minutes, and I'll make sure you're back for your call. Leona's tone brooked no argument. I'm not just here to bring you coffee and be decorative. A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. You're very good at the first part, exceptional at the second. 20 minutes later, they walked side by side through the estate's gardens. The formal landscaping near the house gradually gave way to more natural settings, wildflower meadows, wooded paths, and finally the shore of a small lake glimmering in the late morning light. I had no idea all this was here, Leona admitted, breathing deeply of the crisp autumn air. It's beautiful. My father designed the landscaping. Al-Anon's pace had slowed as they moved farther from the house, his shoulders gradually losing their rigid set. He believed in creating spaces that appeared effortless, as if nature had simply been encouraged rather than controlled. He had a good eye. These transitions feel seamless. Al-Anon nodded, a distant look in his eyes. He used to say that true wealth wasn't about possessions, but about moments, having the freedom to experience beauty without distraction. They reached a small wooden dock extending into the lake. Without discussion, they both moved to sit at its edge, their feet dangling above the water. Did you bring me to your father's boathouse on purpose? Leona asked quietly, noticing the structure at the far end of the dock. Al-Anon's jaw tightened. It's not a boathouse anymore. I had it converted to a studio years ago. A studio? Painting mainly, sometimes sculpture. He spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather rather than revealing another layer of himself. Leona turned to study his profile, surprised. You're an artist? I wouldn't go that far. His lips quirked in a self-deprecating smile. Let's say I'm an enthusiastic amateur who finds the process therapeutic. Would you show me? The request clearly caught him off guard. He hesitated, vulnerability flickering across his features. They're not very good, he warned. I'll be the judge of that. She bumped her shoulder against his gently. Unless you're afraid of an art school dropout's critique. Terrified, actually. But he rose to his feet, extending a hand to help her. Up, the boathouse-turned-studio was a simple structure with windows on 3 sides to capture the light. Inside, the space was organized with the same precision as Al-Anon's study, but here the precision served creativity rather than control. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against the walls. A large easel stood by the north-facing window, currently holding a half-finished landscape of the mountains at sunrise. Painting supplies were meticulously arranged on a workbench. Leona moved slowly around the room, studying each canvas with genuine interest. The paintings weren't technically perfect. Some proportions were slightly off, some color transitions needed refinement, but they possessed an emotional honesty that many technically superior works lacked. These are really good, she said, stopping before a particularly striking abstract piece in deep blues and violets. You don't need to be kind, Al-Anon replied, watching her nervously. I'm not being kind, I'm being honest. She gestured to the abstract. This one especially. The emotion comes through clearly. There's a depth of feeling here that can't be taught. She turned to face him. How long have you been painting? Since I was 15. My therapist suggested it. He ran a hand through his hair. Afterward, I had trouble expressing myself verbally. Painting became an outlet. And you've kept it up all these years. When I can make time, he acknowledged, which isn't as often as I'd like. Leona moved to the easel, studying the unfinished landscape. Is this what the view looks like at sunrise? From the east terrace, yes. He stepped beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. It was the morning after my accident. I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about how close I came to never seeing another sunrise. The admission lingered between them, raw and honest. Impulsively, Leona reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. But you did see it, she said softly, and many more to come. His fingers tightened around hers. For a long moment they stood in silence, connected by more than their joined hands. Then Allanan cleared his throat. Would you like to try? He asked, nodding toward the canvas. Leona's eyes widened. Paint on your work. I couldn't. It's just a canvas, and I'd like to see how you approach it. What followed was the most enjoyable. Our Leona had experienced in years. They stood side by side at the easel, adding to the sunrise landscape together. Allanan proved to be a patient student, asking questions about her technique and absorbing her suggestions without ego. For her part, Leona found herself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of painting, the muscles in her hands remembering skills long neglected. The joyful focus of creation, that state where time disappeared and only the canvas existed, enveloped her completely. She was adding delicate gold highlights to the clouds when Allanan's hand on her shoulder startled her back to awareness. Your conference call, he reminded her, amusement coloring his voice. It's nearly 11. Oh, Leona blinked, disoriented. I completely lost track of time, I noticed. His smile was warm, his eyes lingering on her face. You get a little crease right here when you're concentrating? His thumb gently touched the spot between her eyebrows. The casual intimacy of the gesture stole Leona's breath. They stood impossibly close, his hand still on her shoulder, his eyes holding hers, with an intensity that made her heart race. For one suspended moment, she thought he might kiss her. Part of her, a larger part than she cared to admit, hoped he would. Instead, he stepped back, the professional mask sliding back into place. We should head back to the house. The walk back was quieter, both lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the mansion, Allanan broke the silence. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For dragging me outside. For not treating my paintings like a CEO's vanity project. He hesitated, for seeing me, not just the name or the bank account. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. That works both ways, you know. You see me too. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. Perhaps that's why my mother is so concerned. She recognizes the danger. What danger? They had reached the terrace. Allanan paused at the door, his hand on the handle. The danger of finding someone who makes the rest of it seem less important, he said quietly. Then, before she could respond, he opened the door and stepped back into his other world of screens and spreadsheets. Leona remained on the terrace for several minutes after he'd gone, her heart racing with possibilities she'd never allowed herself to consider. 2 weeks. She had agreed to 2 weeks, 10 of which remained. 10 days to maintain professional boundaries. 10 days to guard her heart against a man who had everything, except perhaps the one thing money couldn't buy. Chapter 7. The accusation, the morning. Sun streamed through the windows of the blue suite as Leona prepared for her 6th day at the Cade estate. Nearly halfway through her agreement with Allanan, she found herself increasingly reluctant to contemplate its eventual end. Their relationship had evolved from wary professionalism to something that felt dangerously like friendship, or perhaps something deeper. After their shared painting session, Allanan had begun to include her in more aspects of his daily life. He'd invited her to join him in his study while he worked, asking her opinion on matters far outside her expertise, simply because, as he put it, "You see things differently than the yes men I usually consult." Leona brushed her hair, studying her reflection critically. The woman in the mirror looked healthier than she had a week ago, her complexion warmer, the shadows beneath her eyes faded. Mathilde's cooking and regular sleep had restored her physically, while Alanon's company had awakened parts of herself she'd neglected for too long. Yet doubt still crept in during quiet moments like this. Last night, she'd attended a conference call with Alanon and his executive team. While he had valued her perspective, the technical business terminology and casual references to eight-figure deals had reminded her just how different their worlds were. A feeling of being an imposter had settled deep in her chest, one she hadn't quite shaken off. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Expecting Harrison with her morning tea, she called, "Come in!" Instead, Matilda bustled in, her normally cheerful face creased with worry. "Oh, child, I'm so sorry to be the bearer of bad news." Leona's stomach dropped. "What's happened? Is Alanon all right?" "Mr. Cade is fine, but—" Matilda wrung her hands. "The mistress has returned with that nephew of hers. They arrived an hour ago, and they're in with Mr. Cade now. Victoria's back?" Leona wasn't surprised. The woman seemed determined to maintain control over her son's life, but the timing felt significant. "Did something happen?" "It's the company board meeting tomorrow. She always tries to influence him beforehand." Mathilde's voice lowered conspiratorially. "But that's not the worst of it. She's brought that woman with her." "Eliza." No, Miss Cordelia St. James." Mathilde pronounced the name with unmistakable distaste. "Victoria's goddaughter. She's been trying to match them for years." "Oh." The single syllable felt inadequate to express the complex emotions that surged through Leona: surprise, disappointment, and something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy. Mathilde patted her hand sympathetically. "Don't you worry. Mr. Cade can't stand the woman, all polish and no substance, that one, but I thought you should know before you walk in unprepared." "Thank you, Matilda." Leona squeezed the older woman's hand gratefully. "I appreciate the warning." "That's not all." Matilda hesitated. "Harrison overheard them planning something. Victoria seems determined to discredit you somehow." "Discredit me? What could she possibly—" "I don't know, child, but be careful today. That woman is dangerous when she feels threatened." With that ominous warning, Matilda departed, leaving Leona to gather her composure. She opted for a simple navy dress that conveyed professionalism without ostentation. Whatever Victoria had planned, Leona wouldn't give her ammunition through inappropriate attire. Voices echoed from the main salon as Leona descended the stairs. She paused outside the double doors, steeling herself before entering what would likely be a hostile environment. The scene inside confirmed her expectations. Victoria Cade presided over the gathering like a queen holding court, immaculately dressed in a pale grey suit that emphasized her slender figure. Dominic lounged nearby, scrolling through his phone with affected boredom. Alanon stood by the windows, his posture rigid with barely contained tension. The newcomer, presumably Cordelia St. James, perched gracefully on a settee. She was strikingly beautiful in a polished society page way, ash-blonde hair arranged in an elegant chignon, cream silk blouse, and tailored trousers that accentuated her willowy frame. Alanon spotted Leona first. Something like relief flickered across his features. "Ah, Leona, good morning." All eyes turned toward her. Victoria's smile didn't reach her calculating eyes. "Miss Mercy, how lovely of you to join us." "Mrs. Cade, I didn't realize you'd be returning so soon." Leona kept her tone pleasant but neutral as she moved to stand near Alanon. His presence at her side steadied her. The Blake Foundation Gala ended earlier than expected, Victoria replied. And, with the board meeting tomorrow, I thought Alan might appreciate some family support. How thoughtful, Leona murmured, noting how Alan's jaw tightened at the shortened version of his name. Victoria gestured toward the blonde woman. This is Cordelia St. James, my goddaughter. Cordelia, this is Miss Mercy, Alan's nurse. The hesitation before nurse spoke volumes. Cordelia extended a manicured hand, her smile practiced and perfect. Charmed. Victoria's told me all about you. I doubt that, Leona replied with equal pleasantness, accepting the handshake. Cordelia's grip was surprisingly firm. Cordelia has just returned from Paris, Victoria continued. She's been curating an exhibition at the St. James Gallery. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's quite prestigious in the art world. The deliberate reminder of Leona's abandoned career stung, but she maintained her composure. I'm familiar with it, yes. Congratulations on the exhibition, Miss St. James. Please call me Cordelia. Her cultured voice carried the faintest trace of a European accent. Any friend of Alan's is a friend of mine. To Leona's surprise, Cordelia seemed genuinely pleasant, lacking the condescension she'd expected from Victoria's protégée. Perhaps she was a more nuanced character than Matilda had suggested. Alan cleared his throat. Cordelia is joining us for lunch before returning to the city. She has meetings this afternoon. The subtle emphasis on her departure gave Leona a flicker of satisfaction. Whatever Victoria had planned, at least one element would be short-lived. Actually, Victoria interjected smoothly. There's been a change of plans. The gallery called while we were driving up. The collector has postponed until tomorrow, so Cordelia will be staying overnight with us. Her smile was all triumph. I've had Harrison prepare the Rose Suite. The Rose Suite, adjacent to Alan's master bedroom, as Victoria had pointedly mentioned during their first dinner. The message couldn't have been clearer. To Leona's surprise, Alan's expression darkened with genuine anger. Mother, we discussed this. I have a full schedule of calls this afternoon in preparation for tomorrow's meeting. I won't have time to entertain guests. Don't be silly, darling. Cordelia understands how busy you are. She's perfectly capable of amusing herself. Victoria patted the seat beside her. Leona, do join us. We were just discussing the disappearance of the Harrington diamond. Disappearance? Leona asked, reluctantly taking the offered seat. Dominic finally looked up from his phone. Aunt Vivian Harrington's prized diamond necklace has gone missing from the family vault. Quite the scandal in certain circles. How unfortunate, Leona replied, uncertain why this gossip would concern her, especially since it was last seen at the charity gala 2 weeks ago, Victoria added. The very night before Alan's accident, in fact. Something in her tone set alarm bells ringing in Leona's mind. She glanced at Alan, who looked equally confused by the conversation's direction. What a strange coincidence, Victoria continued, her gaze fixed on Leona. The necklace disappears, and the very next day Alan has an accident and is rescued by a complete stranger who stays by his side for a week. She raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. One might almost think it was planned. The implication hung in the air like poison. Leona felt her cheeks flush with indignation. I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Mrs. Cade, but I'm not suggesting anything, my dear, merely noting the curious timing. Cordelia shifted uncomfortably, clearly not having been briefed on this aspect of Victoria's plan. Victoria, perhaps we should discuss something else. Nonsense, darling. I'm simply making conversation. Victoria's voice hardened slightly. Though, in light of what Harrison discovered this morning, these coincidences become more troubling. Harrison? Ellenon's confusion seemed genuine. Victoria reached into her handbag, withdrawing a small velvet pouch. With theatrical precision, she upended it on the coffee table. A diamond tennis bracelet tumbled out, catching the light in brilliant sparkles. "This was found in Miss Mercy's suite this morning," Victoria announced, hidden in the lining of her suitcase. Harrison was merely checking that the room was properly prepared, and he felt something unusual in the lining. Naturally, he investigated. Leona stared at the bracelet in shock. "That's not mine. I've never seen it before." "Then how did it get into your suitcase?" Victoria asked, wide-eyed innocence belying the malice beneath. "You tell me," Leona replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "Since apparently your staff searches guests' belongings as a matter of routine, only when there are concerns about valuable items going missing." Victoria turned to her son. "Alan, I know you want to believe the best of people, but the evidence is concerning. Perhaps we should contact the authorities." Leona's heart hammered against her ribs. The trap had been carefully laid, her word against Victoria's, with physical evidence to support the accusation. She looked to Alanon, hoping against hope that he wouldn't believe this obvious setup. His expression was unreadable, his eyes moving from the bracelet to his mother's triumphant face to Leona's stunned one. To her dismay, doubt flickered briefly. In his gaze, "This bracelet belongs to my mother," he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "It's been in her jewelry box for years." Victoria's mask slipped momentarily, revealing surprise that he recognized the piece. "Yes, and now it's been found in your guest's possession." "A guest who arrived with nothing but a single suitcase of clothes," Alanon pointed out, though. His voice lacked the immediate conviction Leona had hoped for. "Who has had no access to your wing of the house, where your jewelry is kept. Perhaps she explored while we were away," Dominic suggested, clearly enjoying the drama. "The jewelry safe requires a fingerprint and code," Alanon countered. "Neither of which Leona would have." "Then how do you explain this?" Victoria demanded, gesturing to the bracelet. Alanon's gaze hardened, but before he could respond, Harrison appeared at the doorway. "Excuse the interruption," the butler said with impeccable timing, "but I need to speak with you urgently, sir." Alanon nodded, looking almost relieved at the interruption. "We'll continue this discussion shortly. Excuse me." As he left the room with Harrison, Victoria's triumph was palpable. Cordelia looked increasingly uncomfortable, while Dominic watched Leona with undisguised interest, like a scientist observing a specimen under glass. "Well," Victoria said into the awkward silence, "perhaps we should give Miss Mercy some time to consider whether she wishes to offer an explanation before we involve the authorities." The threat was clear. Leona rose from her seat, her legs surprisingly steady despite the turmoil within. "I don't need time to consider anything, Mrs. Cade. I didn't take your bracelet and we both know it." "Such righteous indignation," Victoria murmured, "very convincing." Before Leona could respond, Alanon returned, his expression thunderous. Harrison followed, bearing a tablet. "Mother," Alanon said, his voice dangerously quiet, "would you care to explain why the security footage shows you entering Leona's suite at 6 this morning, alone, carrying what appears to be a small pouch?" The color drained from Victoria's face. That's absurd. I was merely checking that the room was suitable." "At 6 in the morning, while Leona was showering." Alanon's gaze was glacial. "The timestamps on the footage are quite clear, as is the image of you removing something from your pocket and handling Leona's suitcase." Victoria's composure cracked for the first time. "You're spying on me? In my own home? This is my home, Mother, and after your previous concerns about security, I had additional cameras installed throughout the public areas." He gestured to Harrison, who turned the tablet to display the footage, including the corridor outside the guest suites. The video clearly showed Victoria entering Leona's room with furtive movements, casting glances over her shoulder to ensure she wasn't observed. Cordelia gasped softly. "Victoria, you didn't!" Of course I did, Victoria snapped, her careful mask finally slipping completely. Someone needs to protect this family from opportunists and gold diggers. If Alan won't see reason, sometimes more direct measures are required. The naked admission hung in the air. Dominic whistled low. Well, this just got interesting. You planted evidence to frame an innocent woman, Alan stated flatly. To what end exactly? To have her arrested? To destroy her reputation? To open your eyes? Victoria rose, her composure replaced by genuine emotion. You've known this woman barely a week, and suddenly she's influencing your business decisions, staying in our home, being treated like family. What do you really know about her? I know she saved my life when she had nothing to gain from it, Alan replied, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I know she sold her most precious possession to pay for medication I needed. I know she has more integrity in one finger than you've demonstrated in this entire deplorable scheme. The raw emotion in his voice left Leona breathless. Even Victoria seemed momentarily stunned. I want you to leave, Mother, Alan continued. Now, not tomorrow, not after the board meeting, now. Victoria's shock gave way to calculation. The board meeting is tomorrow, Alan. If I'm not there to support your acquisition proposal, are you threatening me? His incredulous tone suggested he'd never heard her speak so openly of using her influence against him. I'm reminding you of reality, Victoria replied, regaining some of her poise. Family comes first, Alan, always, even when we disagree about what's best. The statement hung in the air, its hypocrisy breathtaking given what she'd just attempted. Alan stared at his mother as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Leave, he repeated quietly, or I'll have security escort you out. Victoria gathered her dignity, reaching for the bracelet still lying on the table. This isn't over, Alan. When you come to your senses, you'll understand I was acting in your best interest. The only person's interest you were serving was your own, he replied coldly, as usual. With a final glare at Leona, Victoria swept from the room. Dominic followed, though not before giving Alanon a look that combined sympathy and fascination. Cordelia remained clearly uncertain whether she was included in the banishment. Alan, I had no idea she was planning this, I swear it. To Leona's surprise, Alanon's expression softened slightly. I believe you, Cordelia. You've never had her talent for deception. The blonde woman relaxed marginally. What she did was inexcusable. I'm so sorry, Miss Mercy. The sincere apology caught Leona off guard. Thank you. Cordelia hesitated, then continued with careful dignity. I think I should leave as well, given the circumstances. Alanon nodded. Harrison will arrange a car. After Cordelia departed with graceful composure, Alanon and Leona were left alone in the suddenly quiet salon. Harrison had discreetly withdrawn, leaving them to process the dramatic confrontation. Leona sank back onto the sofa, adrenaline draining from her body. She hates me that much. It's not about you, Alanon replied, running a hand through his hair in frustration. It's about control. She can't stand anyone influencing me besides her. He sat beside Leona, taking her hands in his. I'm sorry you were subjected to that. You hesitated, Leona said quietly, needing to acknowledge the moment that had hurt most. When she first accused me, you weren't immediately certain of my innocence. Alanon's face registered genuine remorse. For a moment, a single, shameful moment, decades of conditioning made me doubt. Not because of anything lacking in you, but because my mother has never been so blatant in her manipulations. He squeezed her hands gently. It was a moment's weakness on my part, not a reflection of your character. Can you forgive me for that? The honest admission, with its acceptance of responsibility rather than defensiveness, touched her deeply. Yes, we all have moments of doubt. Thank you. His gaze held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I need you to know something. Whatever this is between us, and I'm not presuming to define it, it's real. And it terrifies my mother precisely because it's something she can't control. The simple statement hung between them, laden with implications neither of them had the courage to articulate fully. Not yet. What happens now, Leona asked. With your mother, the board meeting. Now. Alanon's expression hardened with determination. Now we prove her wrong, about everything. In that moment, with his hands warm around hers and his eyes reflecting a resolve that transcended the brief span of their acquaintance, Leona allowed herself to believe that perhaps, against all odds, they could. Chapter 8. The prayer dinner that evening was an exercise in controlled hostility. Victoria maintained a veneer of civility while directing barbed comments toward Leona, who responded with a composure that surprised even herself. Alanon remained mostly silent, his attention focused on documents for tomorrow's board meeting. Cordelia attempted to engage him in conversation, touching his arm frequently and referencing shared memories that excluded everyone else at the table. Her efforts met with minimal success. Alanon's responses were polite but distant. After the interminable meal concluded, Leona excused herself, claiming fatigue. In truth, she needed space to process the day's events. Victoria's gaze followed her from the room, calculating and cold. The sanctuary of the Blue Suite welcomed her with its quiet elegance. Leona curled up in the window seat, watching darkness settle over the mountains. Despite Victoria's failed attempt to frame her, a seed of doubt had been planted, not about her own innocence, but about the viability of any connection with Alanon. Their worlds were so different. Could something genuine possibly grow from such disparate roots? Sleep proved elusive that night. Around midnight she gave up and slipped from bed, wrapping herself in a soft robe. The mansion was eerily quiet as Leona padded silently through the corridors, needing movement to settle her thoughts. Her wandering led her to a small chapel tucked away in the east wing, a surprising feature in such a modern home. The space was intimate, with a few simple pews facing a modest altar. Moonlight filtered through stained glass in jewel-toned patterns. Leona slipped into the back pew, the familiar atmosphere bringing unexpected comfort. Though not particularly religious, she had attended church with her father after her mother's death, finding solace in the rituals, if not always the theology. "I know it's been a while," she whispered into the silence. "I'm not even sure who I'm talking to anymore. God, the universe, Mom. Maybe just myself." The sound of her voice was absorbed by the chapel's perfect acoustics, leaving no echo. "I don't know what I'm doing here. This was supposed to be simple. 2 weeks, help him recover, take the money, start over." She sighed deeply. "But nothing about Alan Cade is simple. He's nothing like I expected. Behind all that power and wealth, he's just human, wounded, real." Moonlight shifted as clouds moved across the night sky, patterns changing on the chapel floor. "I think I'm falling for him," she admitted, the words barely audible even to herself. "Which is completely impractical and probably a terrible idea. We're from different worlds. His mother hates me. In a week our agreement ends, and I walk away." Her voice caught. "That was the plan. That's still the plan. It has to be." Tears welled unexpectedly, spilling down her cheeks. "Oh, Mom, I wish you were here. You always knew what to say when my heart and head disagreed." She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "Dad always said I feel things too deeply. That I give too much of myself to people who are just passing through my life." The silence enveloped her, neither judging nor absolving. "I've never belonged anywhere. Not really. Not since you left. When Dad got sick, I thought caring for him was my purpose. After he died." She trailed off, remembering the hollowness that had followed her father's passing. "I've been drifting ever since. Until now." until him. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the admission. But I can't build a future on 2 weeks of connection, no matter how real it feels. I can't mistake his kindness or attraction for something deeper. When this ends, I need to walk away with my heart intact. A sound from the doorway made her turn sharply. Allanan stood there, his expression unreadable in the shadows. How long he had been listening, Leona couldn't tell, but the stillness of his posture suggested it hadn't been a brief moment. Heat rushed to her face. "I didn't realize anyone was there." "I'm sorry," he said quietly, remaining at the threshold. "I couldn't sleep. I saw the light under the chapel door." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. "Did you mean it?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "About falling for me?" The direct question left no room for evasion. Leona considered lying, deflecting, making light of her confession, but the raw vulnerability in his eyes demanded honesty. "Yes," she admitted simply. He moved into the chapel then, moonlight revealing his face more clearly. What she saw there made her breath catch. Hope, fear, longing, all warring for dominance. "I've been fighting it," she continued, needing him to understand. This wasn't supposed to happen, 2 worlds colliding temporarily. That was the agreement, not this. "This," he repeated, stopping before her pew. "And what is this, exactly?" "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "Something that terrifies me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That makes 2 of us." He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, yet maintaining a small distance that seemed symbolic of the larger gaps between them. "I come here sometimes," he said after a moment. "Not to pray exactly, just to think in a space that isn't touched by business or family expectations." "It's peaceful," Leona agreed. "I didn't expect to find a chapel in your ultra-modern mansion." "My father insisted on it when the house was designed. He wasn't religious in a traditional sense, but he believed in sacred spaces." Allanan's gaze moved to the stained glass window. "The lake in the window is where he taught me to fish when I was 6, one of my happiest memories." The personal share touched her deeply. "Thank you for telling me that. I've told you more about myself in the past week than I've told anyone in years," he admitted. "That's part of what terrifies me." "What's the other part?" His eyes met hers in the dim light. "That in less than a week you'll walk out of my life. That this connection we've found is temporary by design." The raw honesty of his words mirrored her own feelings so perfectly that Leona found herself speechless. After a moment she reached for his hand, interlacing their fingers. "I'm scared of how much I'll miss you," she confessed, "of building fantasies around a man whose life is so different from mine." "Is that what you think this is?" he asked quietly. "A product of circumstance, isn't it? If I hadn't witnessed your accident, we never would have met," he completed her thought. "That's true. But does the beginning of a story determine its ending?" The question hung between them, unanswerable, yet essential. Leona studied their joined hands, her artist's fingers against his broader palm, so different yet fitting together perfectly. "I don't know what happens next," she said finally. "I only know that right now, in this moment, I'm exactly where I want to be." Allanan's free hand gently tilted her chin up until their eyes met. "So am I." The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable, as natural as breathing, as necessary as heartbeats. His lips were gentle against hers, the contact almost reverent. Leona's eyes drifted closed, her free hand rising to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady rhythm beneath her palm. When they parted, Allanan rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing a little faster. "I've wanted to do that since the hospital," he confessed. A small laugh escaped her. "Even with the hospital gown and unwashed hair?" Even then, his smile was visible even in the dim light. "You were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen when I opened my eyes." They sat together in the quiet chapel, hands still linked, the weight of tomorrow's uncertainties temporarily lifted by the simple joy of connection. Whatever came next, Victoria's plots, the ending of their agreement, the vast differences in their worlds. In this moment, they had found something real in each other, and perhaps, Leona thought as Alanon's arms slipped around her shoulders, drawing her close, perhaps that was enough to begin with. Chapter 9. The Confrontation's Soft Morning. Light filtered through the chapel's stained glass, casting jewel-toned patterns across Leona's face as she stirred. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind. This wasn't her bedroom. Then memory returned. The midnight conversation, the confessions, the kiss. She and Alanon had talked for hours in the quiet sanctuary, eventually drifting to sleep with her head on his shoulder. Now he was gone, though his jacket had been carefully draped over her like a blanket. A folded note rested on the pew beside her. Had to prepare for the board meeting. Didn't want to wake you. Last night meant everything. A smile tugged at her lips as she touched the note, remembering the gentle press of his lips against hers, the vulnerability in his eyes as he admitted his fears. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt a certainty about her place in Alanon's life, not as his nurse or guest, but as someone who mattered to him personally. Reality intruded as she checked her phone. It was already 7:30, and Alanon would be leaving for the city soon. She hurried back to her suite to prepare for the day, hoping to see him before he departed. As she rounded the corner to the main staircase, she nearly collided with Dominic, who was ascending with a coffee cup in hand. "Well, well," he drawled, looking her up and down with undisguised interest. "Coming from the East Wing at this hour." Interesting. Heat rushed to Leona's cheeks as she realized what her rumpled appearance and early morning wandering might suggest. "I was exploring the grounds," she replied, the half-truth awkward on her tongue. "Of course." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Alan's in his study, if you're looking for him, though I should warn you, he's in quite the state this morning." Something in Dominic's tone set off warning bells. "What do you mean?" "The board meeting. Today is more complicated than expected." He sipped his coffee casually. "Victoria's brought in some heavyweight allies. She seems determined to block Alan's acquisition plans." "Why would she do that?" Leona asked, genuinely confused. "Wouldn't that hurt the company?" Dominic's laugh held no humor. "Oh, you really don't understand the Cade family dynamics, do you? This isn't about business. It's about control. Victoria's sending a message." His gaze sharpened, "and I think we both know what triggered it." Before Leona could respond, Harrison appeared at the top of the stairs. "Miss Mercy, Mr. Cade was asking for you. He's about to depart." "Excuse me," she murmured to Dominic, grateful for the interruption. His voice followed her as she moved away. "Just remember what I told you before. When it comes to choosing between you and the company, there's only one possible outcome." Leona pushed his words aside as she hurried to find Alanon, but a seed of doubt had been planted. In the light of day, away from the intimate chapel setting, would Alanon's feelings remain as certain? She found him in the foyer, checking messages on his phone while Harrison supervised the loading of briefcases into the waiting car. Seeing her, Alanon's face transformed, tension momentarily replaced by genuine pleasure. "There you are," he said, moving to meet her. "I was afraid I'd miss you. I just found your note." She smiled, suddenly shy in the face of their new, undefined connection. "Good luck with the meeting today." He glanced around, noting Harrison's discreet withdrawal to give them privacy. "About last night?" "We don't have to discuss it now," Leona interjected, seeing the conflict in his eyes. "You have more important things to focus on." "No," he said firmly, taking her hand. "Nothing is more important. I meant what I said last night, Leona. All of it. The conviction in his voice eased some of her anxiety. So did I. When I get back, tonight we'll talk properly, make some decisions. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the simple touch sending warmth through her. Together. A car horn sounded from outside. Victoria already waiting impatiently. Al-Anon's expression darkened momentarily. Mother insisted on accompanying me, claims she needs to speak with board members before the vote. He sighed. I could use your presence today, honestly, your perspective. I think that might complicate things further, Leona replied, though part of her longed to go with him, to support him through what promised to be a difficult day. You're probably right. He squeezed her hand before reluctantly releasing it. I'll call when the meeting breaks for lunch. As he stepped toward the door, Leona suddenly called after him. Al-Anon? He turned back. Yes? Remember who you are. Not the CEO, not the Cade heir. You. She met his gaze steadily. That's the person worth fighting for. Something shifted in his expression, a strengthening of resolve, a clearing of doubt. With a nod that conveyed more than words could, he departed. After the car disappeared down the long driveway, Leona found herself at loose ends. The mansion felt oddly empty without Al-Anon's presence, despite the staff moving quietly about their duties. She decided to spend the morning in his studio by the lake, finding solace in painting as she waited for his promised call. Hours passed in creative focus, her hands working almost independently of her thoughts, which kept returning to the night before. She was adding highlights to a lakeside sunrise when her phone finally rang. Al-Anon's private number. How's the meeting going? She asked after greeting him. His voice sounded strained. It's complicated. Mother brought unexpected allies. She's still trying to block the acquisition, among other things. He sighed heavily. She's presented the board with concerns about my judgment, used my accident as evidence that I'm not thinking clearly, brought up my father's history. The pain in his voice made her heart ache. That's cruel. It's Victoria. His tone hardened. She's also informed them about you. Leona's stomach dropped. What about me? She's suggesting I've been unduly influenced by a fortune hunter with a questionable background. Claims you've manipulated me during my recovery. That's ridiculous. I know. His voice softened. I know who you are, Leona, better than she does. A commotion sounded in the background. I have to go. The vote is starting. I'll call when it's over. Hours passed with no word. Leona returned to the mansion as darkness fell, worry growing with each passing minute. She was pacing in the great room when the front door burst open. Victoria swept in first, face flushed with triumph, followed by Cordelia and Dominic. Their animated conversation halted abruptly when they spotted Leona. Well, Victoria said coldly. Still here, I see. Where's Al-Anon? Leona asked, ignoring the barb. My son is dealing with the consequences of his poor judgment. The board has temporarily suspended his authority pending a full review. Shock rippled through Leona. You did this to your own son? I protected the company he seems determined to risk. Victoria handed her coat to Harrison. Alan will understand eventually that I acted in his best interest. Like hell I will. All heads turned as Al-Anon strode through the doorway, his expression thunderous. He looked exhausted, but radiating controlled fury. Darling, Victoria began, we can discuss this privately. No more private discussions, Mother. His voice cut like steel. No more manipulations. No more using my father's suicide as a weapon against me. The word hung in the air. Suicide. Something Victoria had clearly worked hard to keep hidden from the social circle she inhabited. Alan, please, Victoria hissed, glancing nervously at the staff. Al-Anon's gaze found Leona, his expression softening momentarily before returning to his mother. I've spent years playing by your rules, building the company, maintaining appearances, sacrificing personal happiness for the Cade name. And now you'd throw it all away for Her? Victoria's voice dripped with disdain as she gestured toward Leona. This isn't about Leona. It's about you refusing to see me as anything but an extension of the company. His voice remained steady, though Leona could see the tension in his shoulders. I've allowed it for too long. What exactly are you saying? Victoria demanded. I'm saying I'm done. The board may have temporarily suspended my authority as CEO, but I still control the majority of voting shares. His smile held no warmth. A fact you conveniently forgot, Victoria paled. You wouldn't. I already have. I've called an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow morning. The board will be restructured, your seat included. You can't remove me from my own husband's company. Watch me! Allanan stepped closer to his mother. You crossed a line when you used my father's death against me. You crossed another when you targeted Leona. Victoria's composure cracked. She's nobody. A gold digger who happened to be in the right place at the right time. She'll leave you the moment she gets what she wants. That's enough! Allanon's voice rose for the first time. Leona saved my life. She sold her most precious possession to pay for medication I needed. She stayed by my side, expecting nothing in return. His eyes locked with Leona's across the room. She sees me. Not the CEO, not the Cade fortune, just me. The raw emotion in his voice left Leona breathless. Even Victoria seemed momentarily stunned into silence. I love her, Allanan said simply, the declaration hanging in the air. Like a challenge. Victoria recovered quickly. You've known her barely 2 weeks. Sometimes 2 weeks is enough to recognize what truly matters. He turned to Dominic and Cordelia, who had been watching the exchange with undisguised fascination. You should all leave now. My driver will take you to the city. This isn't over, Alan, Victoria warned, her voice low. You're right about that, he agreed. But the rules have changed. I suggest you adapt quickly. After a tense moment, Victoria gathered her dignity and swept toward the door, Dominic and Cordelia trailing behind. At the threshold, she paused for one final salvo. You're making a terrible mistake. She'll never belong in our world. Allanon's response was immediate. Then perhaps it's time I found a better world. The door closed behind them with a decisive click, leaving Allanan and Leona alone in the suddenly quiet room. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of his declaration hanging between them. Did you mean it? Leona finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Allanan crossed the room to stand before her, taking her hands in his. Every word. The part about loving me. Especially that part. His blue eyes held hers steadily. I know it's fast. I know it defies logic, but I've spent my life making rational decisions, and none of them have made me as happy as these 2 weeks with you. Tears pricked at Leona's eyes. Your mother isn't entirely wrong, you know. I don't belong in your world of board meetings and regardless. Then we'll create our own world. He lifted one hand to cup her cheek. I don't care about any of it, the company, the money, the social position, if it means losing you. What are you saying, Allanan? I'm saying our 2-week agreement is almost up, and I'm asking, hoping, that you'll consider extending it, indefinitely. The proposal hung between them, breathtaking in its simplicity and its implications. Leona's heart hammered against her ribs. I love you too, she whispered, the truth of it resonating through her entire being. But I need you to be sure, really sure. This isn't just about defying your mother or rebelling against expectations. This is your life. The most certain I've ever been, he replied without hesitation. You make me feel alive, Leona, like I'm more than balance sheets and business strategies. Like I matter as a person, not just a name. He drew her closer, his forehead resting against hers. Stay with me, not as my nurse or my guest, but as my partner, my equal. In that moment, all Leona's carefully constructed walls crumbled. The practicality, the caution, the fear, all washed away by the certainty in his eyes and the answering resonance in her own heart. "Yes," she whispered, the simple syllable carrying the weight of 1,000 promises. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with shared passion and relief. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, clinging to each other as if afraid the moment might dissolve. "What happens now?" Leona asked, her head resting against his chest, his heartbeat strong beneath her ear. Allanan laughed softly, the sound rumbling through him. Now we begin. Together." Outside, the threatened rain finally began to fall, gentle droplets against the windows like nature's applause for two hearts finding their way home against all odds. Chapter 10. Heart's Redemption. 3 months after, the night of declarations and choices, Leona stood on the terrace of the Cade mansion, watching the first snow of winter dust the mountains with silver. So much had changed since that stormy October night when she'd pulled a stranger from a wrecked car, yet the core of who they were, both individually and together, remained steadfast. The days following Victoria's expulsion from the board had tested them both. True to his word, Allanan had restructured Cade Industries' leadership, facing resistance from old guard members loyal to his mother. The business press had reported the upheaval with barely concealed glee, speculating wildly about the sudden changes. Their first real argument had erupted a month into their relationship, when Allanan unconsciously excluded Leona from a decision about their living arrangements, assuming she would simply move permanently into the mansion. His automatic expectation had triggered all her fears about losing her independence. "You're doing exactly what your mother does," she'd pointed out, hurt and angry, "making decisions for people rather than with them." The color had drained from his face at the comparison. He'd left the room without a word, returning hours later with a realtor's listing for a modest cottage on the edge of the estate, a place that could be entirely hers if she wanted it. "I don't want to be my mother," he'd said simply. "I want to be your partner." That night had marked a turning point, cementing their commitment to build something genuine together. Footsteps sounded behind her, and warm arms encircled her waist. Allanan's chin rested atop her head as they gazed at the winter landscape together. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured. Leona leaned back against him. "Just thinking about how life can change in an instant. 3 months ago, I was homeless and hopeless. And now?" His breath warmed her ear. "Now I'm standing on a mansion terrace with a billionaire who loves me." She turned in his arms, smiling up at him. "It sounds like a fairy tale when I say it aloud." "Not a billionaire," he corrected with mock seriousness. "A temporarily suspended CEO who happens to have significant personal assets." Leona laughed, the sound carrying across the snowy gardens. Such a hardship. His smile transformed his face, erasing the lines of responsibility that often creased his brow. "We'll manage very well with the right motivation." He kissed her softly. "Speaking of which, are you ready for tonight?" Tonight was the reopening of Riverside Gallery, purchased by Allanan and transformed into a showcase for emerging artists. Leona had been named director, a position that utilized both her artistic background and her organizational skills. She'd insisted on taking a modest salary rather than simply being given the title, determined to earn her place. "Almost ready. Though I'm still nervous about your mother being there." Victoria had not accepted defeat gracefully. After a month of icy silence, she had reached out with an olive branch so thin it was practically transparent. Yet something had shifted after Dominic, surprisingly, had approached Allanan with evidence of Victoria's long-term manipulation of both the board and her son. "She'll behave," he assured Leona. "Harrison will be watching her like a hawk." "I should start getting ready," Leona said, though she made no move to leave his embrace. 5 more minutes. He tightened his arms around her waist. "I've been in meetings all day. I've missed you." "You saw me at breakfast." entirely too long ago. His blue eyes, once guarded, now gazed at her with open adoration. His expression grew more serious. Are you happy, Leona? Really happy? This life is very different from what you were used to. The question revealed the vulnerability that still occasionally surfaced in him. I'm happier than I've been in years, she answered honestly, but it's not because of all this. She gestured to the grand house and grounds. It's because of you, because of us. Relief and love mingled in his eyes. That's good, because there's one thing that would make me happier. Instead of answering, he stepped back, reaching into his pocket. What he withdrew made Leona's breath catch. A small velvet box. I had a whole speech planned, he said, suddenly looking nervous. But standing here with you, watching the snow fall, all those carefully prepared words seem inadequate. He opened the box, revealing not a massive diamond, but a delicate band of twisted gold, set with a small emerald. It looked antique, unique, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry Victoria favored. This was my grandmother's, Alanon explained. My father's mother. She was an artist too, a potter. She married my grandfather before he made his fortune, when he was just a struggling entrepreneur. His voice softened. When she died, she left it specifically to me, with instructions to give it only to someone who loved me for myself, not the Cade name or fortune. Tears pricked at Leona's eyes as he dropped to one knee, still holding the ring box. Leona, mercy, you found me when I was lost, literally and figuratively. You've taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that there's strength in opening your heart. His voice wavered slightly. I want to spend my life with you, creating, growing, building something that matters more than any company. Will you marry me? Snow drifted around them, each flake catching the fading sunlight. In this perfect moment, Leona felt the pieces of her life. The struggling artist, the dutiful daughter, the woman who had sold her mother's necklace to save. A stranger, all coalescing into the person she was meant to become. Yes, she whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Yes, I'll marry you. Alanon slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms. Their kiss was warm, despite the chill air, a promise of countless tomorrows. I was so nervous, he admitted with a laugh. I faced down hostile takeovers with less anxiety. Did you think I'd say no? Leona asked, genuinely curious. I thought you might say it was too soon, that we should wait, that your independence. She silenced him with another kiss. Some things you just know, she said when they broke apart. Some connections transcend time and logic. As they returned inside, Matilda appeared, her sharp eyes immediately spotting the ring. She let out a cry of delight that brought Harrison running. Finally! Matilda exclaimed, engulfing them both in a flower-dusted embrace. I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the wine cellar. Harrison's dignity cracked enough to reveal a rare smile. Congratulations, sir. Miss Mercy? His eyes shone with genuine pleasure. Your father would be proud. The simple statement brought unexpected emotion to Alanon's face. He cleared his throat before replying, Thank you, Harrison. That means more than you know. Later, as they drove toward the city for the gallery opening, Leona twisted her new ring, still adjusting to its presence. What are you thinking? Alanon asked, reaching across to take her free hand. About how this all started. If you hadn't been driving too fast that night, if I hadn't been at that particular bus stop, if I hadn't lied to stay with you in the hospital. If, he squeezed her hand, we could drive ourselves crazy with what-ifs. What matters is what happened. What matters is now. And what happens next, she added with a smile. That's the best part. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles just beside the ring. We get to decide that together. As the car approached the gallery, Leona spotted Victoria waiting near the entrance, regal in a classic black ensemble. For a moment, anxiety fluttered in her stomach. Then, to her surprise, Victoria stepped forward. As they exited the car, offering a small, genuine smile. "You look lovely tonight, Leona," she said, her tone lacking its usual edge. The older woman's gaze fell to Leona's hand, immediately noticing the engagement ring. Her eyes widened in recognition. "Mother's ring," she said softly, looking to Alanon. "She would have approved." "Grandmother knew what mattered," Alanon replied simply, his arm secure around Leona's waist. Victoria nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. "Well, it seems congratulations are in order." She extended her hand to Leona. "Welcome to the family, my dear. I suspect neither of us will make this easy, but perhaps we can try." The olive branch was genuine this time, imperfect but real. Leona accepted her hand. "I'd like that." As they entered the gallery together, Leona felt a certainty she'd never known before. The path ahead wouldn't always be smooth. Victoria would likely never fully accept her. The business world would continue to scrutinize Alanon's decisions, and merging their vastly different worlds would present ongoing challenges. But in this moment, with his hand warm in hers and their future stretching bright before them, none of that mattered. What mattered was the truth they'd discovered in each other, that sometimes the most unlikely meetings lead to the most perfect matches, and that true wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts and everything to do with the capacity to love and be loved in return. The gallery lights welcomed them as they stepped inside. Before they joined the waiting guests, Leona leaned up to kiss her fiancé one more time. "Ready?" he asked against her lips. She smiled, knowing the question encompassed far more than just this evening. "With you, always."